smiling faces, especially those who have the camera on. So, how is everybody today? Well, I think we're going to have a great discussion today, and we're going to be talking about the arts and community outreach and community engagement. I'm still working the waiting room, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, I love to start with a quote or a quotation. So I thought this one really reflected community. Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much. And that's by Helen Keller. So like we usually do, I just wanted to start by asking who would like to share some of the events and activities over the past few weeks that have really been sustaining you.
I'll share one.
Yeah.
We opened our new exhibit today. So that has just been, I can't tell you how exciting. We opened to members yesterday and had several folks coming in. Obviously we had to open in new and different ways. We couldn't have our typical opening reception, but we did a virtual tour in the morning, which was a challenge. It took our team, all week to figure out how to do it, but I think we did it pretty successfully. And then we had 2 different tour times for folks. And then Nandini did 2 different presentations to fewer than 10 people each time, or fewer than 20 people each time. And it was so wonderful to see folks back in the museum. So we're just mighty excited about, business as much as usual as possible, but mighty excited. So hope folks will take the chance to come see the new exhibit. It's awesome. It's the F Word.
I love it. Do you want to do an advertisement for it and tell us what it's about?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. It's the F Word. Yes, you heard me right. The F Word. We mean female.
Okay.
So it's an exhibition of exclusively female artist works that are in the Hunter's permanent collection. Nandini actually had been working on this exhibit, really probably she started about 2 years ago, thinking that, we've got a number of works by female artists that aren't typically on view, either because they're too fragile or they're too large. So she wanted to pull this exhibit together. So she did that. And fortuitously, it is landing during the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. So it worked out, really nicely. It also worked out nicely given COVID and, traveling exhibits and obviously our exhibit schedule just got shot to pieces with COVID. So it's been really nice that we've had this opportunity to do that. So hopefully folks will come see it.
Well, it sounds great. I'll have to come visit. If I can just ask everyone to remember if you're not speaking, just to please put your mics on mute. And that would really help out with the sound. So anyone else want to share what other arts and culture events and activities? Yeah, I see you, Joyce. What is it?
Okay, mostly what I've worked on this summer or through the spring since we shut down in March, is I've been doing a lot with my seniors because I do work with seniors as part of my job. And many of the seniors I'm working with are not online, either by choice or they just don't want to know. So I do a mailing to them about every 5 to 10 days. I try very hard not to do them on the same day every week because seniors, and I know I'm a senior, but many seniors live what we call doctor's appointment to doctor's appointment. They fall into these ruts that just kind of spiral you down into a black hole. So I try to send them things that on an irregular basis. Usually what I'll send them is some exercises that they can do during commercials when they're watching TV. I'll send them some recipes, maybe something different that they could make using whatever the fresh vegetables in that are. But I also encourage them to, when they look at television, don't just sit and watch game shows. I will include in their mailing, this is a documentary that's going to be on the History Channel or on PBS. I encourage them that if the library is open, they can take books out if they don't want to read. The library has coffee table books. A lot of people don't know that. But those, you know, those great big picture books? Oh, the library has a zillion of them. And you can just do that search on the website. If they are not able to do that, what I will do is I will go and I'll talk to my senior and say, what is the book that you want? And I will take their library card information on the phone, you know, take their library card information and send it to them and have the book put out. Sometimes I have to pick them up for them. Sometimes they're able to get out and go get it themselves. So and I also try to send them an inspirational story, because we all need to read something inspirational. And I always try to send them something that's funny. The funny that I sent out a couple weeks ago that my seniors thought was really funny, because I do send them exercise worksheets that they can do. I sent them information on how to get an absentee ballot, because I wanted them all, are you ready for this, drum roll, to exercise their right to vote. Now they thought that was hysterically funny. It was just, it's a little tiny activity, and I always include a handwritten note. People don't think of that, but I'll tell you, the art of the handwritten note is going away.
Hey Joyce, we actually have a question for you. Someone asked if you would say what organization you're with.
Oh, I'm sorry. I work for the City of Chattanooga in youth and family development. I'm a recreation specialist, and I spend half of my day teaching senior exercise classes, and in the afternoons I teach arts and craft classes to the kids in the center. So we've been able to take the kids virtually, but it's been a little more challenging with the seniors. Those that seem to have internet access are not struggling as much as those who don't. So
maybe, and I love the idea of, I love what you're talking about with the seniors, with, you know, some of the challenges of them engaging online. And I hope that as we go through the presentation and afterward, I know some people or some organizations like the Chattery have been doing the Art 65 classes. And I've seen some of those gorgeous paintings and the pottery that has come out of those, and would love to hear from them too. But thank you for sharing with us though. Those are some great ideas, yeah.
I'm always looking for anything that I can do that I can send to them. I'm trying to get some money out of the budget now so that we send craft packs to the kids to keep the arts going. They get a craft pack, and it has all the materials they need to do an art activity, including directions. And then we do a video, and the kids get the URL on YouTube to look it up so they can go do the activity. And I want to do the same with my seniors, but theirs would not be attached to a YouTube video, so that they would have something else to do, because their seniors are isolated anyway. And this has just magnified it.
Yeah.
So we're trying to come up with things, but that's what I'm doing for activities to
Well,
keep everybody.
love it. Joyce, they want you to put your email in the chat if you don't mind. And then someone said that the exercise your right to vote joke was funny. They like that.
Yeah, what's that? I'll tell you, I just felt so smart the day I figured that out, that I could say exercise. My great aunt was a suffragette.
Okay.
And she talked about going into Boston and protesting and coming home that night, and her father sent her to bed without supper because he did not believe that women should have the right to vote. And after, she said, after my dad fell asleep and I could hear him snoring, my mother came upstairs and gave me a plate of food.
Well, we always have to have those allies and those accomplices. So yes, I love it. Well, thank you for sharing.
Thank you, James, for the chance.
Yeah, so again, as we join in, we have 67 people now. So if you'll just remember to mute your mic, we will keep going and just go into our agenda. So again, we're talking about community engagement and community outreach. Today, we're going to be hearing from Athena Buxton, Charlotte Caldwell, and then we want to hear from you all of the updates and the announcements and wonderful things that are going on in the community. So at this point, oh, I found this picture actually, Athena, in one of the resources you provided, and I just thought it was lovely. Let your community in. That's something we have to remember. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, and if you'll introduce yourself and just let me know when you'd like for the slides to progress, and we'll go from there.
All right, thank you, James. So my name is Athena Buxton. I work as the education coordinator for the Hunter Museum of Art. I'm actually pretty new to Chattanooga. I moved here in January. I'm from Texas originally, and that's where I grew up. That's where I went to school. That's where I really got interested in working in museums. I actually got set on this path to work in museum education about 6-7 years ago when I had the opportunity to take an internship at the Houston Museum of African American Culture, which I believe was like 3 years old when I started as a little intern, very new. It's about 10 years old now. And then ever since then, I've sort of hopped around different institutions and finally landed here. And one of the things I get to do at my job that I absolutely love is develop some community outreach projects. So I'm going to go through and sort of discuss some of the projects I've done, some sort of tips if you are thinking about doing community outreach projects, maybe some things to consider if you are doing this. I'm going to ask James to move on to the next slide. So I included this quote by the great late Claudine Brown, who was a fantastic museum educator, sort of spent her final years at the Smithsonian, and she sort of wrote this in an article she published many years ago called "Community Can Be Made of Individuals Who Share a Common History or Common Societal, Economical, or Political Interests. Community is not solely an ethnic group, a neighborhood, or the residents of a designed area." And I really loved it because it sort of points to like the complexities of dealing with community, that one person can at one time be a part of many different communities for many different reasons. And it's something to consider as you're developing your own projects and you are working with your local community, that it is a really diverse, complex facet of people. And another definition here is just to define what outreach means. So it generally refers to an institution's efforts to engage with new audiences. So whether that be teens or seniors like Joyce was talking about, or underserved communities, it could be any number of people, or it generally applies to providing services or resources to underserved communities. So you're going out of your way to make sure a community that might not have access to something is getting access to that. So I want to see if we can take a moment, maybe through the chat, or if anyone's willing to unmute themselves, sort of discuss how they define community or outreach, or how your organization defines it, since that's really going to impact the type of programs that you do.
Hey, Athena, this is Brittany Shaw.
Well,
I don't know, can you guys hear me?
yes.
So I work with a home builder, and the reason I wanted to hop on the call, I am just really interested, especially with the onset of COVID, and and I kind of think of, especially now after post-COVID, or during it, in some ways, when I see community, thinking of it in a little bit more literal way, because we've, for now anyway, lost the luxury of being able to go out. So an idea I've had is just almost like bringing kind of art where you are, and that kind of thing. So it's sort of like almost community in reach, internal marketing of art within a community. And I guess I'm just kind of curious, has anyone done anything like that where you try to bring art inside your organization, or, closer to where you are?
I love that, Brittany, thinking about sort of a community as your organization in itself. Sometimes we always think of community as being the outside, but it involves the inside too. Your employees are all part of their own communities. You as one organization is really involved in a tight-knit community. Interesting.
We have a few comments in the chat box too, Athena.
Oh,
And Jordan Shrugs mentioned, community for me goes beyond streets, borders. It's about the people who we share a common connection with. That's a lovely way to think about it, beyond just the where people live. but who you connect with. And then sometimes community refers to our close group of studio members or a tidy community culture internally. Other times we use to define the larger Chattanooga area. That's a really good point. Sometimes community sort of means the entire city. So the city of Chattanooga and wanting to serve everyone. Thank you everyone for sharing and being willing to write in the chat box. I'm gonna ask James to go down the next slide. So sort of, if you guys are planning to do community outreach projects or you are thinking about working with the community, these are some sort of questions I think that everyone should consider before you start doing it. So what's your current audience? Who are you serving now? What communities do you work with? Who do you want to serve? And then why do you want to serve them? And that why is a really important component as you're doing this. We don't always take the time to think about what our actions are doing or why we're doing it. But when it comes to working with people out in your community, the why is like equally as a point, almost as important as the who that you're working with, because you don't want to ever run the risk of tokenizing a person or a group of people. You want to make sure that you're choosing to work with them because you really want to build that relationship. You really want to work with that community. You want your organization to really connect with them. You don't ever want to do it because you're checking a box or you feel that you have to do it or for the sake of appearances. And when you have that sort of level of sincerity going in, it gets a lot easier to sort of do this and work with it. And then another one to consider is how can you reach this audience? So again, I'm gonna pick on Joyce a little bit because she gave such a great example starting out and so well explained. So she works with seniors, and she was talking about calling them, like they don't always have access to internet, so that's not a great way that she can connect with them. So those are things to consider. What are some other avenues out of this? And then have you worked with this audience before? So if you do have a program that you've done and you found that this audience you want to reach responds to it well, maybe you can use that to sort of move forward as a template to how to connect with this group of people. And it's always important to remember that within a community, there are many different audiences. So if we're talking about the larger Chattanooga area, you have thousands and thousands of different audiences within it, whether that's teenagers, whether that's seniors, whether that's the LGBTQ community. There's any number of audiences within that. And you always want to remember that your audience is not a monolith. It can be really tempting, like say you want to start a teen program, that you find a teenager and you talk to that teenager and use that teenager sort of as a template of what that audience wants. But it's important to remember that there are many different teenagers with many different needs, feelings, dreams, and that one person may not feel the same as everyone else within that audience. So you need to try to do a wide swath of people and make sure that when you are trying to connect with an audience, that you're connecting with a diverse sect of that audience. One thing as sort of an example that I really love, and I'm going to use the museum because I work there, is they have a program called BPATH, Black Professionals at the Hunter Museum of Art. And that's a program that's run by a committee that's made from a large swath of Black professionals, from musicians to teachers to business people, and they all sort of get an input and how that program goes out, so they're not sort of drawing on one person to speak for an entire community, because that's a lot to expect of a person. I'm a 20-something-year-old female. I don't speak for 20-something-year-old females. I don't even speak for all 20-something-year-old females who wear glasses and have dark hair. And it's a lot to expect someone to do that. So just to keep in mind as you're sort of going through and you're identifying an audience, to make sure you're kind of doing the due diligence to treat them as unique individuals. I'm gonna ask James to go down one more. And a really important facet, if you are doing community outreach work, is to really work on building meaningful relationships with the communities you want to work with. And this can be really hard sometimes. People might be wary of your organization if they've never worked with it before. Sometimes organizations can be frightening. I've worked in museums, and one of the things that's terrifying for people who want to come to museums is that really intense neoclassical architecture for some places. It can be scary for a lot of people. To go in a space like that they've never been, that they might not feel that they belong into. So the best way to sort of kind of get around these things is sort of taking the time to go out and meet the people you want to work with. So don't always invite them to your organization. Take the time to drive down, meet them where they are. It shows that you're really willing to put the work in for it, and talk to them. Ask them about their specific needs. it's kind of hard to imagine that any one person here would know what a community or what an audience is facing, especially if you're not a part of that community or audience. It's much better to sort of go to the people you want to reach and ask them what they need, how they want to work with your organization. Let them tell you what they need. And, when you talk and you actively listen, they might, tell you their concerns or their issues. Listen to them. See if there's ways to work around it, sort of get past that anxiety or fear or any number of concerns they have. And then avoid making assumptions about that group. You'll find that when you meet them, they'll surprise you. You'll see all these wonderful people and they might not match what you initially thought. And that's, great. Don't sort of work on making that assumption. And then work to sort of create a safe and welcoming environment. One of the biggest reasons people won't attend programs or they'll be hesitant for it is they don't feel like that's a space for them. And you guys are part of, many different art organizations. I know in museums, talking to people in my past, some people are like, well, I've just never been to a museum before. I shouldn't go to a museum because that's not for me. And that's a perfectly valid reason. And you want to sort of work to sort of get past that apprehension. And then one thing I absolutely love to do to sort of work to build relationships, because relationships take a lot of time. Anyone here has friends who knows, a lot of work goes into that. I love to partner with organizations or community leaders who already have a deep relationship with the audiences I want to reach, because it's a little bit easier to start connecting with people when, you have someone working alongside you who knows that person's middle name, knows what their grandparents are. I work mostly with kids under the age of 18, so I like to work with organizations that know that kid loves science but hates math and has a dog they love, and, these little things that make it easier sort of to connect to people. And we'll go on to the next one. And then sort of a big part of sort of designing a community outreach program is the actual programming. I would say save this step almost to the last. It's really tempting when you're thinking and you're sitting down, you'll come up with a fantastic program. It will sound lovely. You'll work out, the budget for it. You'll write lesson plans if you're in education. But then you sort of do it and you realize, well, no one shows up, or the people that you wanted to come to, the audience you wanted to reach, didn't show up to it. But that might happen if you didn't take the time to see if, your program was even something that they would be interested in. If it was meeting a specific need they wanted to be filled, or it wasn't advertised to them, or there might have been obstacles towards that program. One example I sort of like to posit towards people is, when you walk up to a building and you see a set of stairs, you might never consider that an obstacle. You might just walk straight in the building and never give it a second thought. But for many people, that stairs might be a barrier. It might prevent them from coming towards this. They might need a ramp, or for any number of reasons. So programming's function the same way. There are many sort of obstacles that will prevent people from coming, from the time of your program to, the cost of your program to where your program is located. That can be a big one, and you really want to try to work out as many obstacles through that. The big three I've always found with a lot of different audiences always comes down to cost, time, transportation. So when I'm doing a program, the biggest barriers to people always comes cost of attending that program, especially if you're working with like underserved communities or lower income families. Time is a big one for a lot of people. People only have a set amount of free time in a week. And, I work with kids under the age of 18. If your parents are working, that's a lot of time that they don't have to take you someplace or to be somewhere. And then of course, transportation, which feeds in that as well. Like, do you have the means to get someplace? And for a lot of people, they might not, for any number of reasons, from their parents are out of the house to they can't drive anymore, or either they're too young or they're too old. Any number of things that can prevent that. And before you even sort of go through the process of doing this programming, you've met through your audience, you figured out their needs, you have a general idea of what you want to do, you've considered those obstacles. You have to start looking into resources. Do you have the funds to do this program? Do you have your institutional support? Does it align with your institution's mission statement? Any number of things that might prevent it. I've always been lucky as I do outreach programs. Some of them have a higher cost and I have separate funding for them. Usually the cost of doing it is just sort of my time, and then the materials. Since I'm in art, everything revolves around art projects, and I'm lucky enough to be at an institution that already has, a lot of materials I can draw from that are reusable. So I don't have to spend so much money on buying supplies most of the time. For your institution, it might be different. You might have to wait some time till you have the funding or resources to do this. You don't ever want to get like halfway through a program and then realizing you don't have sort of the means to complete it. You want to make sure you have your sort of ducks in the row before you even start putting in the steps to advertising it. And then another part is collaboration. This is one I struggle with a lot. Making sure that the community that you're connecting with is included in the decision-making process. It kind of gives people a sense of ownership over what's happening and makes them feel more happy to participate when they feel like they're involved and that their decisions matter almost as much as yours do going into this. It's sometimes hard to do to sort of give up that control, but I always like to think of my role more as a facilitator than a manager. I'm supposed to help things happen, not control how they happen. So keep that in mind as you're going through. And then of course, be flexible. When you're working with a particular audience, you might not be able to do the things that you've done in the past. If you're working with young students, you might not be able to take them to your organization for any number of reasons. They might not have the transportation to get there. If you're working with an audience that works for most of the day, you might have to work much later. I had a program, unfortunately, it got canceled due to COVID, and it's sort of to be determined right now. I was going to work with a group of people that were going to be at work all day. And because of that, the program was late at night. And that meant instead of working from 9 to 5, I would be working with this group of people and their kids from like 7 to 9 p.m. And that was something I did to sort of be flexible to make it more amenable to them coming. And this was going to be off-site as well because it was within a neighborhood. It was in walking distance from these people's homes. It was more easy for them to attend. And when you sort of take the time to talk to the people that you're working with, you find out all these things. You find out, what obstacles they have, what they need. For example, with that same program, their biggest concern was like childcare. It was a program that was done in partnership with another organization that was providing counseling to a group of people in a community to discuss their trauma and work through it. But one of their biggest concerns for the people participating in that program is, well, what am I going to do with my children while I'm at this? I have a little 3-year-old. So that organization partnered with us and the YMCA so that the kids of the people participating in this program would not only have childcare through the YMCA, but I would come in and sort of provide an activity. And we discuss art that we have in the Hunter Museum's collection and get to make something. Fortunately, I can't tell you of the success of this program again because of COVID. Hopefully they'll continue it in a few months when things are safer, but for right now, the decision made was canceling it. And then another big point is establishing consistent and sustainable programs. So you don't want to ever run into a situation where you do something once and then that's it. It usually doesn't always help the audience you want to work with. I'm always cognizant of that. It's not healthy for children to have adults kind of hop in and out of their lives repeatedly. And some of the organizations I've worked with have warned me of that. They're like, if you are going to work with us, then you have to be consistent. You have to show up for these kids, repeatedly. We've worked with people in the past who weren't willing to do that. And, it didn't benefit, the people in our cohort. So I'm always cognizant of that. Like, if I'm going to do this program, is there a means for me to do it again? And doing that will also make evaluating the program a lot easier, being able to adapt it. Sometimes we'll create a program and we'll try our very hardest, especially in education, but then it doesn't work out the way we want it. I like to use the example of some museum educators I met a couple years ago. They ran this fantastic program for adults who were living with memory problems like dementia. And their first 2 programs with this went horribly because they kind of worked from the understanding that they knew what they were doing, they knew what that audience needed, and it worked really badly. And how they found out that it went badly is the caregivers and the people they had in the program were telling them how it could have been better. But then they took what was told to them, they recognized that it was valid, and they had the humility to sort of take that advice and change the program. And now it's something fantastic, and they're constantly being responsive to that group's comments and feedback. So when you have sort of consistent and sustainable programs, you can do that. You can, if it doesn't work out the first time, you have time to sort of adapt and change and make it into the best program it can be. And speaking of feedback, I'm going to move down into the last slide I have here on evaluation. If anyone here works in, education, you know how important evaluation is. Every teacher lives and dies by evaluation. We love it. We try to seek it out. As you're designing your program, you have to start thinking about what are going to be your measures for the success of your program. Are you going to do it by, participation numbers? How many people showed up? Are you going to do it by some other measure, like can you tell they learned something? Are you going to test them? And then how are you going to use that feedback? So if you do this evaluation, what are you going to do with that information afterward? Is there room in your program to take that information and do something with it? And then of course, how you evaluate people is really going to depend on your program, your goals, and then the program participants themselves. With children, my lovely group, I can't collect data from them because there's ethical reasons for that. You can't officially collect data from children without the express permissions of their parents. So my evaluation tends to be very informal and unobtrusive. I do observations. I try to make notes of, not only if the kids enjoyed the program, if they keep returning. They might tell me this was boring, I wanted to do something different. Those are things I'll make a note of myself. I'll even try to remember what vocabulary words they use. So I had an after-school program a few years ago that I was a teacher for, and one of the things I checked the success of that program is if we discussed a topic or a term at the beginning of the semester, if the kids were using it as we were talking about art later at the end of the semester, if they were building connections. Now that didn't require me to test the students, it was just me taking the time to be observant and really cognizant of these things. And I sort of want to open the floor to any questions anyone has, or they want to comment. I know I've missed some things in the chat. Ooh, I love Monica Kinsey's. She mentioned earn the community's trust with consistency. Yes. Do work to build people's trust. Trust is hard to gain, and sometimes when you're trying to get an audience's trust, you might be contending with something that happened decades ago or something that happened in another state, and you have to work through that, whatever barrier that might be, and consistency definitely helps. And then I think that's it for public comments. Does anyone have any other questions?
Actually, hi, that was actually brilliant. And this is actually brilliant. I just wanted to keep in mind though that what I think that not was missed, but what I think that something that we definitely need to take a look at when we're working inside different communities is making sure that the messaging is clear, because I think the message that you're trying to convey has to really relate to the community that you work with. For example, if it's Spanish speaking and that is their native tongue, we also have to really make sure that the documentation, anything that we provide, is something that's going to be accessible and easy for them to understand so they can gain that community trust. That was it.
No, that's a great point. And I love that you mentioned language. It's, it's something that we have to take consideration of, what language we use, the type of program we're doing, even down to like how you provide this information. So if you're printing it out, are you putting it online? And I love that you brought it up. Language is something I'm very passionate about. Sometimes I struggle with it because I do speak two languages. Unfortunately, one is useless. It's German. It never comes up. And my Spanish is not the best. So it's one of the things I've struggled lately. Living in the South is making my programs more accessible. Luckily, with my current project, I have a lovely volunteer at the museum. Our docents are fantastic, and one agreed to sort of do all the translation work for me. So I was able to ensure that it would be accessible in multiple languages, at least for English and Spanish. I did not make the decision to write it in German because I don't think any German speakers would needed it or if there is any German speakers in Chattanooga. There's probably some, but not a large population that I'm aware of. But thank you, Shane, for bringing that up. That's all great point and something we should always be cognizant of.
I was listening to a podcast, I think yesterday, and it was about a group of parents who were doing outreach and engagement, and they printed up their flyers in Spanish and sent them out into the community, shared them, and tons of people showed up to the parent meeting. And then at the meeting is when they realized they didn't have anyone to do translation at the meeting. So no one could understand. There was no communication that could happen. So even as we think about language, we have to think it all the way through. And as you were talking, Athena, that example popped into my mind from just a few days ago.
That is a fantastic example. I would love if you sent me the podcast or the article from that. I would love to listen to what happened.
I'll send it to you. I will.
Oh,
I think
thank you, Kelly.
Kelly's saying there.
Awesome. Maybe it will come in handy one day. Maybe I'll do programs in German if there's a need and a want there.
One of the comments on the line was that there are German speakers in Chattanooga, and that brings up the point that if you work with, I'm sure you probably have worked with any of the ESL people who are working with schools. There are dozens and dozens of languages speakers in Chattanooga area, like any metropolitan area now. So there may be some of those that are large enough that they would you might want to think about them too in your programming.
I think the last stat I saw was there were over 70 languages spoken in our schools. I know Spanish was one that was very large, Arabic. So it is something to definitely think about. Thanks for that comment, Betty, too.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Athena? Well, this is some great information. Would you be willing to let us share the slides in a follow-up email?
Of course.
Okay, wonderful. And so I want to now invite Charlotte to come and just give us, a short talk about some of the things that she has been doing with Stoveworks and their engagement efforts.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Athena, that is an incredibly tough act to follow. Nailed it. Josiah is also on the line, and Josiah is actually our programs director, manager, consultant currently, and he's been tasked over the last 6 months with coming up with sort of an educational and programs philosophy. So I will invite him to speak to what he's been working on as well, since I really just get to do the fun back end stuff for the most part. I'm like the aerial view, got the philosophy that we're driving, but it's our team that's doing the dirty work as far as creating accessible language for our audience. What a fun and appropriate segue, I guess, talking about language. James, I'll just share my screen real quick.
All right, I'll stop share so that you can share, and I'll try to make you the host or co-host, okay?
Okay.
Bear with me.
I think, did that work?
Somebody did it.
Okay. I did it.
Thank
I think
whoever that was.
So you can see, this is our website. This is the splash page of our website. And it's so funny, the podcast that you just mentioned, because that's kind of a problem that we run into, right? We do have our website in both English and Spanish. So you can learn about our exhibitions and everything. Luckily, I have a friend who loves us that does this at a reasonable cost, because translation is expensive. But the problem, just to y'all's last point, is that we actually don't have any fluent Spanish speakers on our staff. I can fumble through it, but what we will do upon opening is actually have a person on site at least one day a week, where we indicate on our website that they speak Spanish and can help sort of navigate the themes being addressed in the concepts. in the exhibitions. So where do I begin? Our programming, everything that we're doing is rooted in flexibility and responsiveness. Our goal in exhibitions and sort of our programming is to try to serve as many communities as possible, right? And internally, we've made an active decision to actually not use community as a singular word, but rather communities as plural. Because language, even, not even our own sort of our primary language, English, can be alienating in the ways that we use it, right? And in shifting the way we use it internally, we can hopefully project outward sort of our intent. Another thing that we're trying not to do is to not consider ourselves experts in anything. All of our exhibitions use art as a means through which to communicate complex ideas and complex narratives and sort of unpack them and sort of, work through them together through conversation. In doing that, like, we have to understand as the editors of this conversation, of this content, like we can't be what's the word I'm looking for? It's the explicators, right? Like, I don't know if I just made that up. I don't think I did, but we want to be very clear and very careful in the way that we engage our communities, in that we invite feedback as much as we invite, or as much as we try to communicate these ideas. I'm very unprepared. Athena, you just blow me out of the water. But also, if anybody has a comment or a suggestion or anything, just like tap in. I'm going to stop my screen share right now. But I'm going to ask Josiah to speak a little bit to what he's been working on, because I think this is really going to shape our community's outreach. Josiah, are you present?
Hey, good morning. Hey, beautiful people. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this conversation, Charlotte. So basically, as Charlotte had indicated, I am currently consulting Stoveworks as in a preliminary process of informing the programs and educational work that Stoveworks will facilitate. And so with Mike, the curator, having that vision of the exhibitions, and Charlotte and Caroline looking to like facilitating the residencies and bringing the incredible artists from around the world who will be in the space and create, and also in certain ways engage in the community. What my role is to figure out ways to like help harness that, and to find that synergy for programming that resonates with, as Charlotte spoke to, the multiple communities that we have been serving and aspire to serve. And with the theme of community engagement, it's we take it very seriously, and we also realize the importance of language in this, because community engagement itself is a very loaded term. It can be very easy to make a plethora of assumptions, and thus a plethora of errors. And one thing that we do recognize is that we're not going to do anything perfectly, but what we do want to center is a care ethic in the work. And so at the beginning of my learning about Stoveworks, when Charlotte had first made the incredible move of securing that space, and sharing with me her vision and the work that she and Mike had put into it thus far, even before any breaking ground or anything. One thing that was present on her mind was being able to think about an ethic of care in the work, as it applies to contemporary art spaces, as it applies to nonprofit work, as it applies to institutions and organizations and how they exist internally and externally. And so our ongoing dialogue from that has been about thinking of ways of staffing, ways of systems, ways of engagements, and outreach that centers care for the individuals and the communities with which we hope to engage through the art, through the artists, and through the programs. And so, you know, it's one important part of that is thinking about when you're creating things, as Athena so rightly pointed out earlier. You know, it's very easy to have this idea, that sounds to you and feels like a great idea, and to want to take it somewhere, or to want to place it somewhere, or to give it to a community. But what to you sounds like a process of giving a gift or sharing something beautiful could actually be like a parachute of something unnecessary and something that will stumble and not resonate. And that comes from a lack of communication and a lack of collaboration. And so in order to address that, Charlotte and I have been thinking of like 3 specific themes when it comes to the work of programming for communities and programming based on the exhibitions and projects. And those 3 themes are humility, collaboration, and agency. And all 3 of those, and all 3 of those themes, that takes time. That takes relationship building. That takes it's an ongoing journey of trust. But it's also not a one-time thing. It's a practice. You know, that the way you think of the professions of medicine or law as practice is something that you strive to get better at every day. And so that's been a major part of how we think about when we come up with an idea. Who are we sharing that idea with? How are we communicating this idea? How are we building? How are we networking and connecting with other organizations? And depending on the theme of the art exhibit or the theme of the program, are there organizations already doing work along this theme? And then if so, can we build meaningful collaborations, and can we learn as much as we share? And and that also goes to the heart of StoveWorks. Work is not being someone telling someone something, but rather both parties sharing something new with each other and facilitating that ongoing space of learning where it's not a one channel, but it's a 2-channel means. And so that's an incredible part of the work that we're doing, and it absolutely informs our approach to community engagement through this institution.
Well, I think a lot of people are responding to the humility, collaboration, and agency. And as soon as you, first of all, Josiah, I'm jealous of your beard. Okay, let me just put that out there. But the first thing that I thought of was an example of that with StoveWorks. Charlotte, when you all started your artist residencies program, it was almost like you said to yourself, like, I have a network of people that I know, but to really make this artist residency program reflect the community and have this great energy, then I'm gonna reach out to people in the community and have them nominate artists. And I know you reached out to me, and I said, well, this is my chance to nominate a list of Black young artists that I love and hope that they will come to Chattanooga. And I sent that to you. That was the collaboration part. But when you released the list of who had agreed to come, I was shocked because they were on there. So I think that's a great example of, you know, we have networks, we all do. And sometimes because we just use and engage our own personal networks, we're not really reaching the broader community or reaching as far into communities as we can. And that's a concrete example of something that I saw you do recently. Yeah, I just want to do a quick time check. It's 11:20. So I know that Miriam has created a graphic. First of all, thank you, Charlotte. And
Oh, can I?
oh yeah.
I just want. I'm
Go
gonna
ahead.
post two things. Like, thank you for that, James. We're really actually very excited about Shaniqua coming. She also came highly recommended by a couple other Atlanta artists that I know, so we're very excited. Another artist in residence that we're really excited about is actually Jessica Lynn, who Josiah and I both had the pleasure of meeting years ago, brought here through, I guess, Josiah, you and UTC. And she's gonna be one of our first residents, but she's sort of the source. She's the one who laid planted the seed of what institutional care should look like in my mind, stemming not just from like the sort of the back end, not just the sort of outward public facing sort of ideas of care, but also sort of what it looks like internally as an organization to care for your staff and care for your programs. So I really have to credit Jessica in any of these conversations. And then I'm also going to post a link to an article or to an essay by Anthony Huberman that I probably read like, I don't know, once a month maybe these days, called Take Care. And it's, make sure I don't post it to Josiah privately. So I just, it really sort of takes like an academic or like, just a look at like what it looks like to not be an expert and to approach things as like one who knows one thing and talking to somebody who knows something else.
I love it. Please share those. And I'm excited about Jessica coming too. And she created the Black Dot Arts blog and Tumblr, and it's one of my favorite ones. But I love also that she works to bring people of color into art criticism, which is such a crucial thing now. So we have just a few minutes left, and Miriam worked on a graphic, which I'm gonna share and ask her to just briefly talk about, and we'll share this too. It's kind of like a mind map of how you can do different things in outreach and community engagement.
Yeah, of course. Well, I will once again give credit to Athena. We had a discussion about this, and she helped me put together, based on like her experiences and her strategy. It kind of goes down the list of how she talked about approaching community engagement as far as, taking a look at your audience and really figuring out who you want to connect with. There's also some examples of how to approach these different strategies that she's laid out. And as James said, I will be sharing this. And this is a discussion that we want to continue to have. And we also want to build additional resources in addition to this document. If anyone else has any resources that they want to share, when we do a follow-up email about this, I will send this document out. And Athena also has a list of other articles that pertain to community engagement and outreach. So thank you so much for participating in this discussion, and we will definitely continue to better serve our community by coming together and really focusing on these issues and coming up together as this community is to develop better strategies and share information. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for being part of this community that we've created in this digital space. I mean, we couldn't probably cram 72 people into my dining room, but yet here we are. I love it. So as we end these last few minutes, I really would like to just open it up and ask people to let us know about any things you have coming up this week or over the next couple of weeks. Please share them. If you don't mind, you can share them directly by speaking them out, but we'll try to collect everything that's in the chat too and share that as well. So don't be shy.
Hey.
James, I have a question. At some point a little while ago, you guys had a grant. I think it was just like a $3,000 grant or something like that. Is that still open or has that deadline passed?
So we have right now open our CCC or Community Cultural Connections grants. And if you will place your email into the chat box, I'll ask Miriam to follow up with you about it today or Monday and tell you all about how to apply for it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And also congratulations to the organizations who received ABC grants too. That was some wonderful news.
Hey, if you notice, I have this lovely background about Arts Vote. We were talking about voting earlier, and I put in the chat box, there's a link to the Arts Action Fund where you too can have this lovely Zoom screen and other things in the back in your background. So it's a Shepherd Ferry artwork they did for this effort, but it's like I say, Arts Action Fund, and I put the link in the chat box.
Awesome. And I know they're going to be also offering posters of it too. So I hope to be able to get one. Thank you, Rodney.
James, I placed also in the chat box in regard to voting that Black folk must vote. We are actually talking with the founder of the national movement, Black folk must vote. Actually, that's a slogan that was created back inside the 60s, believe it or not. It was a test study inside Mississippi. This particular organization has been in existence since 2004. And we had a very intimate conversation, especially now during the trying times, with the founder of the movement to really talk about why our voice is important. And it's just beyond Black and brown people. So hopefully if everyone got time, that we're doing it on Facebook, watch party, it'll be on IGTV. Actually, he was interviewed by Woodson Carpenter, our community arts strategist, but it's a really great conversation about where we're at, where we need to go, and why Black and brown folks right now voices need to be heard.
I love it. I might check that out too.
I hope you do.
I know. I think I might get in trouble if I don't. So, Melissa from Crabtree, did you want to share about these scarecrows on the farms?
Yeah, I would. I
Trying
would
to
love
keep-
to. We have a new event. This is the first time we've done scarecrows on the farm at Crabtree. It's a way to increase community engagement in a safe way in light of the virus. And there's 3 tiers: amateur, creative professionals, business, and organizations. And you register to create your own scarecrow. We put them throughout the farm through the month of October, and the community is welcome to saunter about the farm and vote on them. And then at the end of the month, we announce who has won, and you get a prize. And it's be a nice one for the arts community. I have experience with the Atlanta Botanical Gardens doing a similar event, and so we've modeled it around that, and it's been phenomenal to see their submission. So we're excited about what could happen in Chattanooga.
I love it. Maybe Artsville will have to put our head together and come up with a scarecrow.
Yeah, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, Bruce and Linda, do y'all want to talk about the things that you posted?
Sure, James. This is Bruce from Barking Legs Theater. And as many of you may know, we've been doing Wednesday Jazz in the Lounge for about 5 years. We had to cut it off for obvious reasons in March. We continued online for a couple of months and then sort of ran out of material, funding, and technical expertise. We are resuming every Wednesday at 7 o'clock online jazz from Barking Legs in September, and we intend to do it weekly. We're having a outdoor concert to benefit that series a week from Sunday. That's August 30th at 7 p.m. 3 of our favorite jazz musicians, James Crumble, Robert Crabtree, and David Schwab, have volunteered their services, and whatever money we raise will go directly into artist fees so that we can pay the the folks who are going to be coming in to do the online shows on a weekly basis. So we're super excited to get jazz going again.
I love it. Yes. So our time is up, but we're going to send out the chat. We'll post the video to our YouTube page. We're going to follow it with everyone with Athena's slides and Miriam's graphic. And we really appreciate everyone who logged on today. This has been wonderful. It's given me lots to think about, and I hope it does you or has for you too. So everyone, thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
I also just want to make one last plug to our community arts partners. If you could please reply to my survey that I sent out this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, have a great weekend. Bye.